We are live. Welcome to the Blitz, free college football picks for week 2 coming right up. Michigan versus Oklahoma, Iowa versus Iowa State, Oklahoma State versus Oregon, Ole Miss versus Kentucky, Kansas versus Missouri, and any other games you guys want to talk about. If you are watching us live, get in the chat right now. Start firing off those questions. Doesn't matter which game. We don't care. If you want our opinion, ask away. Joining me now, as he has each of the last 2 weeks on the program, is Ralph Michaels, and making his Blitz debut, fresh off of 4-0 week in college football, is Sean Alvarez. Guys, welcome. Ralph, you being the veteran of the show that you are, I'm going to go to you first. Only top 25 matchup of the weekend is number 15 Michigan at number 18 Oklahoma. Michigan didn't look so good last week against New Mexico. I don't know if they were gold bricking or not in that second half, but Oklahoma's taken some early money in the week. What sticks out to you when handicapping the lone top 25 matchup on the board for Saturday?
Brian, I'm not here to bring up bad memories, but we were talking last week. We thought New Mexico may not score. So if you look and you say Michigan had a 452 to 267 yard edge, you say okay. But playing New Mexico, only having 201 yards rushing and only 6.3. I say only 6.3 because you were a 35-point home favorite and you were plus 2 turnovers. So I think Michigan's performance was a poor performance. And you could say they may have not shown everything and they were not wanting to share any of their playbook with the Oklahoma road trip on deck. But, you know, Bryce Underwood, he only had an 8.1 YPPA. That doesn't bode well for anybody. So I look at Michigan and, you know, I had to go to the database. We're always going to do that and take a look at these things. So when we have 2 ranked teams, one of them is the home favorite of -3.5 or higher with a total over 45. Those teams have actually gone 60% against the spread and 71% the last 2 years. So being that home favorite in a non-conference game does mean something. And in game 2, if both teams are off a win by 14 points or more, it's been 55% to the under. And with a total of 51 and less, it's actually been 60% to the under. You know, in Oklahoma, we have John Mater, 30 of 37, 81%, a 3-1 ratio. It was a bad pass on the interception. They didn't get the rush attack going. Again, they were a huge favorite against Illinois State. They only ran for 103 yards and 3.2 yards per carry. The D did hold them to 151 yards. You know, in these big games, ranked teams, ABC under the lights, I'm going to look for a very conservative start again. The full game total is low at 45, but I'm actually going to go first half under for Michigan, Oklahoma, Saturday night.
Oh, interesting angle there. I want to bring up one point here because we talk about Michigan, how underwhelming that final the final score looked against New Mexico last week. There was a key play in the game, and we've got to talk about it because it's really plays in the handicap for this game. Michigan's linebacker, there was a play early in the second half. Barham, he jars the ball loose. Michigan picks it up, returns it for an apparent touchdown. On replay, they not only nullified the touchdown, they ejected him for targeting. That means he's going to miss the first half of this game for the Michigan defense. Is that a big loss? We shall see. Sean, I want to bring you in here, obviously, to talk about this game. With Oklahoma now, you know, we all think they're going to be better this year. Michigan, we don't know what we think after last week. Are you surprised that Oklahoma took the early week money? You know, what are you looking at here in this game? Let's all know in the chat, by the way, what you think, Michigan or Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't. I do get behind Oklahoma taking the early money. You know, after what you and Ralph kind of mentioned with Michigan just kind of looking, you know, not as good, and we saw John Mateer throw for 392 yards, completing 30 of 37 passes last week, albeit against, you know, obviously a weaker competition than he's going to see at Michigan. But, you know, when you look at the box schedule and you look at what he put up, there's a lot more question marks about, you know, the quarterback of Bryce Underwood at Michigan compared to what John Mateer did, not only at Oklahoma, but what we saw him do at Washington State previously. I don't think there's any question marks surrounding him and his ability to sling the football all around the field. And he obviously gets a little bit more talent at receiver than he saw playing with the Cougars last year. But kind of looking a little bit more under the hood about what Michigan did last week, I do think it was a little bit more of a, slow, methodical, not really an exciting type of offense, but I really think that was planned on Bryce Underwood's first start. Let's not throw him to the wolves, kind of like we saw with CJ Carr at Notre Dame last week as well, making his first start. He, running around the pocket, obviously made some I wouldn't say outlandish, but I would say a little bit of a, lucky plays downfield late in the game. But, we saw him a little flustered as well. And I don't think that, the Michigan coaching staff really wanted to deal with that, especially, getting an easy win in week one and then having to travel to Oklahoma to face a much better defense in the Sooners. Bryce Underwood definitely has help at running back. I think Justice Haynes was impressive last week, ripping off a 9.9 yards per carry average. Ralph alluded to it. It's what we looked for him to do against a weaker team. But this is the type of running back that can break it from, any point of the field, whether it be a draw or a toss outside. So I like the fact that Bryce has a running back, that's a little bit more of a safety net. And then as far as the play calling goes, Bryce can absolutely run with his legs. There was no, planned or play called runs. He wasn't really running around after the pocket. If Oklahoma plays a lot of man-to-man defense and he gets a decent, protection up front, he can run for 20, 30 yards before any of these, defensive backs turn around. So I do think that they're going to open up the playbook a little bit more on the Michigan side. And, as far as Oklahoma goes, they did struggle to run the ball a little bit, and they're going to be a little banged up going into this week. Freshman Torrey Blaylock had a little bit of an arm injury, came back in a sling, never returned from the game. They have a transfer in Ott coming from Cal that they had big expectations of, but he got, a little bit banged up going into this. So there's definitely question marks there, but they are deep there as well. So I do think that this is going to be a tough defensive game. I do kind of lean towards the under, but I'm not going to give out a play here. As far as a side goes, I do have one up for a premium play for subscribers over at WagerTalk.
Okay, there we go. I will say one thing with Underwood. We did see young quarterbacks on the road last week. You would think for 18, 19-year-olds, they did struggle a little bit. So we shall see the lone top 25 matchup, Michigan and Oklahoma. Guys, let us know in the chat what you think of that game. We've already got some questions coming in. Jacob Hefner is in. He wants to know the bigger lock. First of all, there's no such thing as a lock. That's going to be my first response to your question. That such a thing does not exist. But he wants to know about the Pitt Panthers minus 21.5. They're playing Central Michigan. The Chips. What a performance that was there. Going across country, beat San Jose State or LSU, Louisiana Tech over 51. I think Pitt's a sharp side, Ralph. I don't know. Between those two, that's what I'm looking at out of those two games.
Pitt may make my card. My 5% last week, opening week, was Central Michigan, San Jose State under. So it was nice to get an easy win to start.
Congrats.
But you look at that game, and the only reason Central Michigan pulled that upset was they were plus 3 turnovers.
Yes.
85% of the teams win and cover if you're plus 3 turnovers. So, you have to remember, going from week 1 to week 2, be very careful, because I'm going to use the example of LSU Clemson. We don't know if Clemson was bad, or we don't know if LSU was very, very good. So while we don't know much in week 1, we still don't know much going into week 2, because we don't know which side was positive, which side was negative. So make sure you don't overreact to week 1 results. You have to take it in the entire body of work. If you watched the game or read the coach's quotes, that's a little bit of a different scenario. But to me, Pitt may get on my card this week, fading Central Michigan, making that long trip to San Jose, playing at night, now traveling to Pittsburgh, and they got a road game at Michigan on deck, playing Big Brother. So it's not quite a sandwich because you're playing a Power 4 school, but after that win, teams that win as a dog only cover 35% in week number 2.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, as a MAC guy, resident MAC graduate here, I'm going to tell you that Central Michigan, I think they're live to make the MAC championship game. Obviously, it's a big step up in class when you're talking about facing MAC teams versus, G5 opponents, San Jose State last week, and then now a Power 4 opponent this week. I talked about sharp money. I'm looking at the odds screen here, guys. DraftKings kind of lagging behind. So I always find this interesting. They're at 21.5 on Pitt. Circa's already up to 22.5. That always kind of piques my interest when I see that discrepancy. Sean, I see you nodding your head. I don't know if you had any take on either of those matchups. Ralph and I seem to be on the same page with Pitt. I don't know if you had anything on that or the LSU Louisiana Tech over that we had a question on.
Yeah, I mean, I was just kind of agreeing with you. I'm even seeing South Point here in Vegas at minus 23 for Pitt. So definitely more of the sharper side there, where the LSU Louisiana Tech is still holding pretty strong at 51, juice to 51.5 under. So I would agree with you guys. I don't have as much of a lean here. One of my, actually my only free play loss in a video breakdown was the Central Michigan San Jose State game. So maybe not, don't have my finger on the pulse as much as you guys do in that action.
Yeah, Ralph, you mentioned LSU. How good are they? I think they are. That was arguably the most impressive win in week 1, I thought, across the country, going to Clemson. I mean, that's a Clemson team everyone just sort of expected to make the college football playoff, expected to win the ACC. They were just going to waltz to an ACC championship because Dabo had hit the transfer portal. LSU looked great. I think they're live to win the SEC. You look at this Louisiana Tech side. Ralph, you mentioned misleading finals early on. Well, Louisiana Tech last week took on Southeast Louisiana, an FCS school. It was not an impressive performance. Louisiana Tech was actually outgained, but +3 in turnovers. So when you see the fact that they won and covered, it was 24-0. They cover as 14.5-point favorites, did La Tech. Outgained, and it was that turnover margin you mentioned, Ralph, that did it. I think as long as the LSU defense, isn't playing with its food, shows up with some intensity off a big win, I think Louisiana Tech's actually going to struggle to move the ball here. And I actually don't think I would be rushing to play an over in that situation.
I totally agree with you, Brian. I mean, you look at Kukuk. He was 14-19 for 130 yards, a 6.8 YPA at home against Southeast Louisiana. Now, again, you're taking the road start. And maybe even more concerning is only averaging 4.0 yards per carry. I would say this, LSU, let me look real quick. What's the total on this? 51, guys?
Yes.
And LSU's a 37.5-point favorite.
Mm-hmm.
So that means 37. We're left at 15. La Tech's team total is going to be about 7.5. LSU team total is going to be 45. So, you can also look at those if you have a preference one way or the other.
All right. Titan CT, one of our favorites in the chat. I see he's in there. Great to see you as always. Any thoughts on Kansas, Missouri, and Duke, Illinois? Kansas, Missouri was one of our highlighted games. We'll get to that in a little bit. I was surprised that some people were surprised how short they thought the line was short in this Illinois Duke game. I mean, Illinois is still, I know people like this Illinois team. They have a lot of returning talent, guys, but I'm going to be playing against Illinois when Big Ten season starts. I don't know if Duke is the team I want to take, just getting 3 here against Illinois. I don't know if either of you have thoughts here. That was a stay away game for me. So I unfortunately don't have very strong opinions on the Illinois Duke matchup.
Well, I'll go. It's you look at it and you look at Illinois, and I do like Illinois too. But again, we don't know what they did. Bielema is in his 5th year. You have Altmaier, so you have a quarterback who last year completed 61%, a great 22-6 ratio. The year before, he had a 13-10 ratio. So it's rare to have a 3rd-year starting quarterback, and that's part of the reason I do like him here. One thing that does concern me is their O-line. I mean, yes, they rushed for 200 yards, but they were sacked 3 times. I mean, you look at Altmaier's numbers, that's a poor offensive line performance. On the Duke side, beating Elon, they did what they had to do. A 548 to 275 yard edge. My power ratings have this at Illinois -4. What I do like about Illinois, and if I had to use an opinion on this game, it's clearly going to be a lean. Last year, remember this Illinois team only lost 3 games. They went to Nebraska. They win by 7. They go to Penn State. They only lose 21-7. Not a bad performance. They got outgained by 155 yards. They go to Oregon. They put up 300 yards, get outgained by 200. You go to Rutgers, you win. You go to Northwestern, you win. You beat South Carolina in the bowl. As a starting quarterback in your second year, and you could go on the road and get quality road wins, now you're coming back for a third season. That's the type of team I want to back early in the season, versus Menza is a new starting quarterback. Last year they had Murphy. Murphy passed for almost 3,000 yards, a 26-12 ratio. Better defense, better team overall, much better quarterback. Clearly has me the edge, even if they're on the road, because he proved to me last year he can get the job done.
Sean, I'm going to give you an option here. If you think that this line is too short as well on Illinois Duke, or we also have a question in the chat here. I believe it was G. Hurt said, can anyone explain why UNC is under a 2-touchdown favorite this week? Look, I know Charlotte was absolutely atrocious against App State. Did you watch North Carolina Monday night? I don't think a lot of people are running to the window to bet fighting Bill Belichick's. It was a great first drive, and then the rest of the game, they sucked really bad. So, Sean, what do you think here? Well, what line surprise you more? Illinois being short favorite at Duke, or North Carolina under 2 touchdowns at Charlotte?
I would say at first glance, when looking at, the games, trying to figure out what's going to make my card and what's not, at first glance, the Illinois Duke being low was kind of my first surprise. But, looking under the hood and looking at how these teams played previously, I agree with everything that Ralph says. They have a much better quarterback. I think they have a better defense as well. So I do think that it's a little bit tight for my liking. It didn't make my card. But if I was going to lay anything on that game, I would lay the 3 or even the 3.5 on Illinois. And I think you're spot on. I actually wasn't surprised at all looking at the minus 13.5 with the Charlotte, North Carolina. They just, outside of that first possession from North Carolina, they just looked abysmal the entire game on both sides of the ball. There's not a lot other than it's Bill Belichick and what he did with the Patriots as far as are they going to bounce back, even though it's a weak team. They'll probably get the win, but are they going to cover 2 touchdowns? They made a lot of mistakes last week, and I don't see them ironing them out, even with Belichick as coach.
Yeah, obviously a short week doesn't help either. Ralph, you have some thoughts here on this Tar Heel State battle.
I do. I'm just going to say this. I mentioned this last week on the show, Brian. I don't use my power ratings to at least week 3. I still update them every week to get an idea. Just so you know, I have North Carolina as a 20-point favorite in this game. Now, I'm not going to get to them. It's my biggest discrepancy so far. Perhaps I just completely overrated them at the beginning of the season. That's why I let 2 to 3 weeks play out, but I have it. But just so you know, I've seen a lot of teams bounce back after an ugly performance and take their pressures out on a weak foe. So I'm not going to bet Charlotte at all. I think them being at Charlotte actually helps North Carolina. When you have that poor of a game and then you have to go to class all week and then you have to, walk to the stadium when you're home, getting away, I think, is a big advantage for me, which wouldn't have me leaning with North Carolina. If they were playing at home as a huge favorite, I would be looking to fade them. So a big difference to me on the schedule.
Yeah, Charlotte took a lot of money last week against App State on game day. I mean, you would have been better just setting a couple $100 on fire because that they were the wrong side. That game they should have lost even worse than they did. All right, let's get back into some of the big matchups. I see the question about Rice, who is a very interesting team. We'll be talking about them just a little bit, but let's get to some of the big games because we had a question on Kansas, Missouri earlier. We'll be getting to that one, but let's go to the Cy-Hawk game. Iowa State. I believe it's 6 straight times Iowa has walked into Ames and gotten the win, Sean. Iowa State has been very impressive the first 2 weeks. They obviously won in Dublin against Kansas State. And then, Ralph, we talked about this one last week. It was kind of to channel our inner Marco D'Angelo, it was a classic sandwich spot, right? They're coming home off the game against Dublin. They've got this on deck. They're playing an FCS team. Well, Iowa State handled their business. They killed South Dakota last week. So it's a short number. Iowa State is laying it home here, Sean. They're 0-6 the last 6 times hosting their in-state rival. What sticks out to you about this one?
I think one of the bigger things that sticks out to me is, I thought the game in Ireland against Kansas State was, played sloppy on both sides of the ball, whether it was Kansas State on offense and defense, and Iowa State did the same thing, in my opinion. So what didn't help out was how poorly Kansas State played last week. Didn't necessarily help me in thinking Iowa State was, as good or as good as they needed to be to beat a team like Kansas State, at least in preseason type rankings for me. And I think the biggest question marks on both teams are, the quarterback play. We see a really well-touted Mark Gronowski coming over from South Dakota State that won 2 times FCS national champions. He can sling the ball around. He did it last year for South Dakota State in a hostile environment at Oklahoma State, throwing for 264 yards. So I don't think the environment at Iowa State is going to really get to him. But he literally threw ground balls to his receivers a few times last week, which definitely needs to be ironed out. And then we saw him throw an absolute frozen rope on 3rd and 13 late in the game. So which Gronowski are we going to get, leading up into this rivalry game? Are we going to get the 2-time FCS national champion, or are we going to get somebody hitting fungos to a shortstop, aka the receivers? But I do really like the running game for Iowa. They get a freshman running back in Xavier Williams, who is an absolute tank. The size of his thighs, he is very tough to bring down in short yardage carries, and also ripped off 11.1 yards per carry average last week. So I do like the running game. It should help out Mark Gronowski, and he's definitely going to need to improve to beat an Iowa State Cyclones team. And as far as the Iowa State quarterback goes, Rocco Breck, he completed just 50% of his passes against Kansas State. He had a better game last week, but albeit obviously against weaker competition. But the biggest question that I have for him when watching him is he tends to get a little flustered when he's not necessarily under pressure, but defenders are just around him. And now he's going to face a really stout Iowa defense that can absolutely pressure the quarterback. And if he doesn't have a running game to take, the pressure off of him and have a balanced offense, I think it could be a long day for Rocco Breck. So for me, the 2 biggest question marks on this game are how are the quarterbacks going to play? And I think whoever plays better come Saturday is going to end up winning this game.
Ralph, we've seen a interesting line move here. This has gone through the key number of 3, 2.5 to 3.5. Iowa State now favored. Is that something that piqued your interest, or what are you thinking about Cyhawk here?
That's clearly what you said to start this video. How they've played the first 2 weeks. Kansas State winning. But again, remember, they got outgained by 70 yards against Kansas State. So yes, they win. A win's a win, especially when it's a conference game. South Dakota 55-7 impressed the hell out of me. But I am a little more concerned than my other guest here, because Gronkowski, 8 of 15 for 44 yards. You complete 53% with a 2.9 YPA at home against Albany is a concern. The concern for me, though, is he left in the 3rd quarter with muscle cramps. And sometimes that can carry over from 1 week to the next. So make sure if you are an Iowa backer, you do have a healthy Gronkowski. I will say this. I talk trends all the time. I rarely have a trend that's 20 years that makes any sense to me that I would use. But you want to talk about probably the most under series in college football over the last 20 years. This series is 17-3 to the under the last 20 years. Last year's game was the second in 12 years to go over the total. And they only scored 39 points. That was because the total was 36. You talked about Iowa coming in here 6 straight times and winning. I looked up a couple things I wanted to share, Brian, with our viewers. We looked at in week 1, I talked about how people always think having a game under your belt or a team playing the second game playing the first in advantage, and it's not. So I wanted to look at how a team playing a 3rd game against a team playing their 2nd game. Again, this is only if you played week 0. It's the only possible scenario. If both teams are FBS teams, the team playing game number 2 58-41, 59%. So don't fall into the trap that Iowa State has more experience. They played 2 games. Iowa's only played 1 game. They haven't quite figured their out. Let's also remember that last year, Iowa led 13-0 at the half, and they lost on a 54-yard field goal with 5 or 6 seconds left. So that, to me, is legitimate revenge. If you lost as a home favorite, especially against your rival, so teams that lost the previous year as a favorite and now are a small dog up to +6, 121-79, 61%. 65% against the spread if they led last year's game at halftime, and 77% against the spread if they had a lead of a touchdown or more at halftime and ended up losing that game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think it's going to be another defensive battle that if you don't turn the ball over, we're only going to see a couple scores per game. But the Gronkowski injury and performance week 1 keeps me from making this a client release, but I'm still going to give a lean out on Iowa.
Okay, there you go. With the line at 3.5, Ralph, I'm inclined to agree. I might take a nibble on Iowa myself in that game, especially because, as you said, low scoring that lends itself to wanting to take the points. Another underdog that intrigued me, we had a question about it earlier, is Rice. For those of you who don't know, Rice is they're turning the clock back. They're going to an option, and it worked last week against Louisiana. A nice 14-12 upset. Talk about not many points there. Houston is a team. If you caught the Power 5 a few weeks ago, I bet Houston over 6.5 wins. Houston's going to win this game. This is a city rivalry, by the way. Rice, for those of you who don't know, located in Houston. But I would not be looking to lay this with Houston. It's plus the points. It's taking points or nothing for me. Dog or pass, so to speak, with the Rice Owls and their new offense. I think it's going to take time for opponents to have faith on this team, learn how to defend. They're going to slow it down. What do we always talk about, Ralph? Option team, Army, Navy, the teams that run these slow, triple option attacks, they cover as underdogs. So I like Rice in that one. I don't know if either of you have a take on Rice in Houston here. I think Rice beat Houston last year, didn't they? Or was it 2 years ago? I remember having a play on Rice against Houston. I'll look that up in just a
No, Houston won 33-7 last year. Rice won 43-41 in 2003. It was game
that's
number
what I was
2
thinking.
of the season. Yeah.
It was 2 years ago they upset. I knew it was somewhat recently. Okay.
You talked about option teams and slowing it down. This is off subject, Brian, but I just put a tweet out. In what bizarro world do you have San Diego State, Army, and Utah all in the top 10 in plays run last week? Is that crazy? Army ran 82 plays last week.
Yeah, and lost. So it might be time to go back to the old side.
They were -3 turnovers. So let's remember, had they had the lead, that's one of those things. That's why stats are very misleading. If they had the lead, they would have slowed the tempo down, ran the pace they did, probably had 60 plays. Because they were -3 turnovers and trailed the whole game, they needed to press the tempo to keep scoring. So great point, but why stats are misleading, and you really have to break them down and not just take them at their core value.
Yeah. Questions on Western Kentucky versus Toledo. I thought that line was a little big myself, to be honest with you. Toledo, interesting spot for the Rockets, the presumed MAC favorite. This is a team that went into Kentucky last week. They took money, Sean. They covered the spread in that game. Now you go from facing Kentucky to Western Kentucky. You go from underdog to favorite. That's not a role traditionally. If you just look at this conceptually, that's not a role I'd be running to back the favorite in. I know they've taken money, but I might, if this number gets higher, I don't know. I might be going with the whole toppers.
Yeah, and kind of like we've alluded to, whether it be sandwich games or whatnot, it was a big game last week, and now a little bit of a letdown spot facing a tough Western Kentucky team. So I definitely agree with you. I do see it at up to 7.5. Actually, it just clicked down as I'm looking at it back to 7. So I agree with you. I would lay the points with Western Kentucky. I'd probably stay away from the money line, but that would be where I would lean.
Questions on Alabama. We mentioned, Ralph, that LSU might have been the most impressive winner in week 1. I think we might all agree that the least impressive loser, Alabama. Kalen DeBoer now has the same number of losses as a double-digit favorite in a season and a half in Tuscaloosa that Nick Saban did his entire time there. He doesn't look well on the sideline. I mean, I'm not a body language expert, guys, by any means, but he just looks ill on the sideline, like he's regrets taking the job. And not to throw it all out, his D coordinator, Kane Womack, who got a lot of love, he gave up a head coaching job at South Alabama to be the defensive coordinator here. His defense stinks. They couldn't tackle last week. Florida State was getting what they wanted. They just look like a tougher team. So it's interesting. A lot of people thought Alabama, 9-1, Ralph, we talked about last week, was a good bet to win the national championship. You talk about, yes, I do. You talk about coming off a bet in just after one game. I do not think Alabama is going to win the national championship, and I think all of our fine viewers would probably concur with that at this point. Look, Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois and wound up playing for the national championship. They were in the last game of the season last year, so stranger things have happened. But, I mean, is Ty Simpson the guy? What do we think about Alabama? What do we think about DeBoer? It could be a short tenure in Tuscaloosa for him?
Let's remember, though, you have Ty Simpson playing on a Power 5 road game against a packed crowd that was actually very excited. Florida State, we brought up last week. We don't know how good Florida State is going to be. With all the transfers they brought in, I talked about the O-line. The experience on the O-line that they brought in from other things, I didn't think they would get it gelled for week 1 against Alabama. I was completely wrong. That's why I'm conservative in week 1, because you can't guess what the portal's going to do or what the NIL kids are going to do for the money. I'll still say this. Even though Alabama looked that bad, SEC teams off a loss have been dynamite against the spread. I would not bet ULM. I'm clearly not going to bet Alabama. But if you forced me to make an opinion, Alabama would still be the way I go, even as bad as they looked in week 1.
Sean, what say you? I mean, ULM, I'll be honest with you, part of me is a little tempted to take the old Warhawks there. They should have covered last week in their FCS game. They did not. That was a bad deal. They took a lot of money last week. Is this a spot for you? You see a team off they're off a terrible loss, Alabama. Is this kind of like Ralph was saying, hey, let's wait and see just what the floor is for this team? Or, again, 2 weeks ago or last week at this time, we were all talking about Bama as a possible national title winner. How are you looking at how much have you downgraded Alabama over the last 7 days?
I mean, as far as going up against top teams like we saw, in their loss against Florida State, definitely downgraded a little bit. I'm going to need to see a little bit more, especially on defense. I thought you hit it right on the head. They just couldn't seem to tackle, and that is a very key and fundamental thing that you have to do on defense, especially when going up against talented receivers and running backs like Florida State showed. I am going to take more of a wait-and-see approach on Alabama, but I do agree with what Ralph said. We're talking about a team, a Crimson Tide team that is talented throughout, whether that be players coming over from the transfer portal, whether that be kids recruited out of high school. These are some of the best and, highly anticipated players in the nation. They can go play backyard football against Monroe this week and cover 37 and a half, 38 and a half. They can put up 40 as far as going up against that team. But to beat good teams and to beat talented teams, you have to be on your P's and Q's. You have to, take care of your assignment and not play, like I said, the backyard football where, you're just slinging it up, letting your running back, run all over like, Bo Jackson and Tecmo football back in the day. I may have just aged myself, but we're still talking about talented kids that can absolutely put up points and they can be a menace on defense. But I am going to take that same wait and see approach, like Ralph said, when they do face tough teams that will hit them in the mouth on offense and defense.
Yeah, I think Alabama's got Wisconsin up next. I think that's the game where we all can, or at least a couple weeks, we can, I think, Wisconsin, based on how pathetic they looked against Miami of Ohio. If Alabama doesn't blow that team out of the water, perhaps there is something truly wrong in Tuscaloosa. Guys, keep those questions coming in the chat. We will be getting to both Florida, South Florida, and UNLV, UCLA coming up soon. But one of our other marquee games this week that we highlighted at the top is Oklahoma State and Oregon. Oregon's a big favorite here. I said before the season that Oregon would miss the college football playoff. That doesn't mean that I think they're going to lose this game. They're not going to lose this game. They're obviously a gigantic favorite. Gundy did what he did, ran his yap. I don't know if you guys, Ralph, if that matters for you when you handicap games, when one coach runs his yap. Obviously, Thomas, we talked just with the game we just talked about, Bama, Florida State. Castellanos ran his yap for Florida State. There was no receipt given from Alabama. Do we think, how are you looking at this one? Oregon is a big favorite here against an Oklahoma State team that absolutely, wasn't good last year. And, I think we all presume the Gundy era is coming to its end in Stillwater sooner rather than later.
Well, let's remember, Oklahoma State was going to use 2 quarterbacks for the first few games and maybe for the first year. Well, now with the injury, Henry got injured on the first play or somewhere, in the first quarter. So Zane Flores had to come in, and he was 13 of 20. So now you have a quarterback playing this game on the road for a guy who was expected to take snaps. That's quite a different mentality for a guy to now have that pressure. I look at, what Gundy said. Oregon's paying a lot of money for their team. From a non-conference standpoint, we shouldn't be playing them. We should be playing teams with a similar budget. To me, that's a cop-out, guys. You made the schedule 4 years ago. To say you're not going to play them now because they spent $40 million. Lanning came back and said, well, that's because we're a winning team and we're used to winning. So I can't tell you what to do. I actually think that it will motivate them a little bit. I think Oregon's going to prove that they're a legitimate team. Teams, by the way, guys, that scored 50-plus points in the opener are 29 and 22, so 57% against the spread. But if teams scored 50 points or more, like Oregon did, they put a 59 against Montana State, and they're a favorite of 28 or more, they have gone 69% since 2018. So you get that offense clicking early, you're a big favorite again, you keep that offense going. I am going to say this. With Oregon having their conference opener on deck, having to go on the road, it's only Northwestern, but again, it is still a conference road opener on your first road game of the season. I'm going to say Oregon has free reign early. I'm going to lay the 17.5 for the first half here.
Ooh. Because
when you get to the second half, he may start resting those players if he gets up by 30 with the conference road opener on deck. So I'll go what I feel is the right play. This actually has a shot to make it as a client release today. So clearly a true best bet for me. Oregon first half, minus 17 and a hook.
I like that angle. Oregon's the only side I could look at here. Oklahoma State gaining just 5.1 yards per play last week. Sean, is it as simple as Ralph and I are making it out to be? Did Oklahoma State even bother showing up in this game?
Nothing in sports betting is that simple, but I really hope that this game proves to be with Ralph, hit it on the head with Zane Flores getting not getting the start, but being looked at and leaned on in his first start. He's a true freshman that's now going to travel to Oregon in a very hostile environment, and obviously a much better defense than University of Tennessee Martin that he played against last week. And the biggest issue is, obviously a weak opponent that they faced last week. Caleb Hicks only had 2.7 yards per carry on average, and the team only amounted to 3 yards per carry on average. That's a very telling stat line on the issues that Zane Flores might face going up against this Oregon team. If they continue to run the ball like that and really struggle getting the running game going, he's going to constantly be playing behind the sticks, letting the defensive line pin their ears back. And it will be a long day if that were to happen. And I really like what Dante Moore, Dylan Gabriel's backup last season, got a little bit of learning the Oregon scheme, and we saw that last week, throwing for 213 yards with 3 touchdowns and zero pass deflections. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit of a bump in talent that he goes up against, but I love that 0 pass deflections stat that Dante Moore put up. And Oregon's got a solid running game with Noah Winnington ripping off 6.8 yards per carry last week, but they also have 12 different players that got carries last week. I really like that in a college offense that can really kind of expose their depth chart and get fresh running backs, especially late in the game when you're facing a tired defense that's struggling to stop them. So I'm on the same boat. I'm laying the Oregon -29. I think they blow them out from start to finish here. And if they get ahead early, I do like the depth of Oregon, even compared to the Oklahoma State starters in this game.
All right. We keep getting questions on UNLV, UCLA. So let's hit it. I've made my opinion felt, I think, the last 2 weeks. I don't like either of the coaches in this game. I think Dan Mullen, it remains to be seen. I think Deshaun Foster. I think UCLA is the second worst team in the Big Ten. I don't want to play either of these teams right now. So I'm going to defer to you guys. Do you have anything on this matchup? Because these are two fade teams for me in 2025.
I'm going to wimp out as well, Brian. To have 14 first downs and 220 yards as a small home dog. And I think I counted, I think there were 27 UCLA fans at the Rose Bowl. Maybe 30. I don't know. The other 30,000 were all Utah. So basically they played a road game in the Rose Bowl. But you're going on the road, you're playing in an NFL stadium. UNLV is not like other places, but UNLV does. They got that excitement at home last year playing in Allegiant. They're finally starting to get some crowds. But if you're UNLV and you allowed 555 yards to Idaho State at home in game one, I can't bet you game two, but I also can't bet UCLA. I will say this, against Sam Houston, UNLV ran 58 plays. UCLA ran 50 plays in week one against Utah. UNLV has run the ball 79 times and passed 47. UCLA's run-pass ratio 28-22. Under would be the only opinion I could give you here.
Okay, there you go. Under. Sean, do you have anything on this one? Otherwise, we'll go to Ole Miss, Kentucky in the SEC.
Not much on this one. This was real close to making my card. I kind of have a rule of thumb when I have plays that I'm putting on my card. If I can't put my thoughts onto a paper and write up an analysis, it is no longer a play. So I kept kind of going back and forth with UNLV and UCLA here. I do think we get a better performance out of Nico at quarterback from UCLA, but I'm not confident to lay that with any plays or bets of my own.
Ole Miss, Kentucky. Let's bring this one up here. It was on our, it's one of the bigger games. Ole Miss, guys. The computers seem to love Ole Miss. They had a big, I don't know if you guys pay how much, what power rankings you guys look at during the week at all, but I do. Ole Miss is a team that really jumped up on the heels of blowing out. They went on a 38-0 run in the second half last week. It was a huge surprise. Ole Miss is really interesting to me this year, and a team that I want to keep an eye on because last year they had the best yards per play differential in the entire country. And with all that talent, it was a real indictment on the coaching of Lane Kiffin that they did not make the college football playoff. And why did they not make the college football playoff? Well, because they lost to Kentucky last year, and now they go to Lexington for a little bit of revenge. I'm going to be honest, my power ratings say this number is short. Ralph, you talked about, hey, power ratings first couple weeks of the year. Be careful. Sometimes they can be misleading. What do you think here? Ole Miss, obviously they're going to be a big favorite because everyone is expecting them, I guess, to beat up on Kentucky in a revenge spot. Kentucky, as we mentioned earlier, money came in against them last week against Toledo, and they didn't cover. So Ole Miss, to me, it would actually be favored. I'm not somebody who likes road favorites very much, but this is one road favorite that I think interests me in the week 2 card.
Well, I'm going to give a 30-second rant.
Okay.
And the most overused word in sports betting is revenge. If you lose as an underdog, you do not have revenge, guys. You are not supposed to win. So quit saying revenge just because you lost. But as you said, if you lost at home as a 15-point favorite and the loss cost you an appearance in the championship, that is revenge. Brian, you said you don't like early away favorites or at all. I wanted to look at conference home dogs in game 2. Now, I'm not one to cherry pick out a week, but after you play your opener, when you have a conference game on deck in your opener, you can sort of not worry so much about what those game worn stats, because you may not want to show anything. Game number 2, conference home dogs since 2003 are 30 and 45, 40%. So the away favorites are 60%. And if you take away conference home dogs of 17 or more, that number drops down to 35% or 65% on the home team. Calzada, they were excited for him. He's an A&M kid. He went to Incarnate Word for 2 years. But again, against Toledo at home, he was 10 of 23, 43.5%. I can understand a team playing poorly and not playing well, but at home and only completing 43% against the Toledo defense and averaging 3.7 YPA, I can't bank on it. With Ole Miss, we saw them race out. Remember, Kiffin does like starting the season quick. Last year, 72 points, 52 points, 40 points, 52 points. But then he played his first SEC game against Kentucky, and they scored 17, 27, and 26. So you can't look at Kiffin and say, oh, the first 4 games of the season, he crushes opponents and runs up the score, because this is the first time he's had a conference game in the first 4. So be careful, again, if you're using those early season stats, that you are delineating that it's a non-conference game. Ole Miss did give up 260 yards to Georgia State. That is something to look at. They did only have 1 sack, and they did try to blitz a couple times. The defense played well. But I am going to say this. Will not make my card at all. But with a pissed off Kiffin and that Ole Miss team and Austin Simmons playing well and Lacey at running back, and I like the defense, and you have Wallace stretching the field for 26 yards per carry on 5 catches. I'd have to go opinion on the Rebels.
Sean, what's the Lane Train? He's one of those guys that's not afraid to run it up late in the game. I've over the last couple of years, I think there was a Vanderbilt game in the last 2 years. I know he punched it in late when he didn't need to. It really pissed me off. But what do you think here? Obviously, he's going to be coming and pissed off after what Kentucky did last year to him. Look, revenge sounds nice, but we would have all thought Ole Miss could have beat him last year. They didn't. Is revenge overrated here? How do you look at this game?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Ralph on that. As far as the revenge, at least narration goes, but I apologize. I'm going to kind of regurgitate a lot of things that Ralph said. I agreed with a lot of his points. I'm actually not as excited as with the 7th-year quarterback, Zach Calzada, leading the Kentucky offense. And remember, this was a game against Toledo last week that was 10-2 going into the 4th quarter. So yes, they kind of ran away with it a little bit at the end with scoring points in the 4th quarter, but this was a tight game. And the fact that a 7th-year quarterback can only amount to 84 yards through the air against the Toledo defense, and now faces an Ole Miss defense, I don't have a lot of confidence in them. And I really liked what Austin Simmons did last week, throwing for 341 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did throw 2 interceptions to a weak team that he's going to have to iron out. But I think there's a lot to like. He can run the football a little bit. He's tough to bring down with his 6'4" frame. So I do like a lot about that. Ole Miss is deep at wide receiver. As we saw last week, they spread the ball around. A lot of people had different catches underneath. Also, stretching the field downfield. So I like that. Like what Ralph said, Kawan Lacey had a solid week 1, but he's also backed up by 2 solid running backs in Logan Diggs and Deuce Alexander that can run well. So you kind of get that, 1-2 punch, or at least fresh running backs coming in, like I alluded to in the last game with, tired defenses late in the game. So I think Ole Miss can absolutely run up the score on Kentucky, and I have no problem laying the -10 here. I think there's a lot of question marks surrounding Kentucky. I didn't like anything about that Toledo game. And I have no problem with the -10. Go Ole Miss.
Okay, there you go. The Rebels, the Lane Train there, getting some love on the program. One more featured game here on the rundown, then we'll close out with your questions, tell you about what we've got going on this weekend over at WagerTalk.com. The border war is renewed. Kansas, Missouri, they haven't played in a long time because obviously Missouri is now in the SEC. Interesting game here for me. Missouri, I thought I have them taking a step back this year, Ralph. I know the schedule's kind of easy, but they were another team. We talked about Oklahoma State. Their plan was to come into the year and give two quarterbacks time. Well, that choice has been made for them with an injury in that position. They also lost their kicker to injury. That's something you need to make note of. Hey, a missed extra point, a missed field goal, that could be the difference between covering and not covering at this level of football. I think the dog is live here, Kansas. They've got 2 games under their belt. They looked good, Kansas did, against Fresno. I would take the points with the Jayhawks.
Mentioned, Brian, when we were talking about Houston and Rice. You said it's the inner city. I think they're the closest, or they're just behind Akron to Kent, the 2 closest Division I schools.
Oh.
Rice is actually very pissed off because this is the final game of the series. Houston moving up to the Big 12, they said, we're not going to schedule you anymore. So we'll see if that little disrespect card plays something here. In this case, I agree with you. I do like the dog plus the points. Mizzou is another team that was going to split snaps. What happened? Sam Horn on the first play broke his foot. So Bayu Priblu threw for 28 passes, but now he's making his first start. Not again. He played almost the entire game. But looking at what he did on one side, I wasn't a huge Jalen Daniels fan, but watching him a little bit against Fresno State, I did not see the Wagner game at all. Granted, you were huge favorites in both, but if you're still completing 80%, you got a 10.1 YPA, you do what you have to do. And sometimes people say, oh, they didn't beat anybody. But we've talked about some teams that played shitty teams and still didn't beat anyone by they won. So you have to remember that it's still a positive for that team to get out and do what they did. Lance Leopold, again, a coach that I respect. He had a team last year. What really impressed me, remember they started off last year beating Lindenwood, and then they lost like 5 or 6 straight games. And what he did to turn it around, beating Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado, and then they did lose to Baylor in the final. That, to me, gives them a lot of confidence here to be able to do that. Jalen Daniels last year, though, on the road, his only road win was at BYU. He did throw for 295 yards. They ran the ball for over almost 250 yards in that game. But I'm with you. I do believe that Kansas, to me, I make this line 3. So to be getting this many points with the better quarterback, yes, he's making a first road game, but it's so much different the first road game of the year with an experienced QB and with an offensive line that did impress me for the parts I watched it. They brought in some new pieces, but they seem to have melded very well. They go on the road. Wouldn't surprise me at all if you do like the Jayhawks, sprinkle a little bit on the money line.
Oh.
Outright upset wouldn't surprise me.
Sean, is the dog live here? The two of us seem to sure think they are. What do you think?
Kind of going back to Ralph's opening sentence in his segment, I'm not big on the revenge game, but at the disrespect angle, I'm in on that, Ralph. Definitely in on disrespect. Let's right the ship there. And I hate to say it and be boring, but I'm going to agree as well. I really liked what Jalen Daniels has done through his 2 games. Like Ralph alluded to, an 80% completion rate, 7-1 touchdown to interception rate, but also he's got 11 carries on the season with a 5.9 yards per carry average. So he can still move the chains with his legs if the secondary kind of gives them the, turnaround man-to-man defense and the pocket breaks down. So I like that. But also I think a thing that kind of leans into how much Jalen can spread the ball around is in week 0, Cam Pickett for Kansas had 77 yards with 2 touchdowns, was their leading receiver, and he gave away to Emmanuel Henderson in week 1, who had 130 yards, 6 catches, and 2 touchdowns. So defenses can't necessarily try and take one receiver out of the game when other receivers are stepping up and the quarterback is more than confident in kind of spreading that ball around and not leaning on, his safety net, if you will. So I do like that. They're going to have to, I would say, help out a little bit more in the running game. They didn't do much throughout the first 2 games, but I really like what Jalen Daniels and this receiver core can do. I think they can put up points in a hurry, but I think they can also make up points later if they get a little bit of help on defense. And I think the big question mark about Missouri, I did like what the transfer from Penn State did at quarterback, 23 of 28, 283 yards, but he also ran for 65 yards on the ground. So he also has that dual threat type of mentality and or pressure for the defense. But the running back transferring from University of Monroe, yes, he is talented, but he ripped off 100 yards on the ground last week, but he also did it against Central Arkansas, a very similar team to what University of Monroe plays throughout his career. So I do kind of have a little bit more question marks about the Missouri running back, Hardy, as far as what he's going to do against a better defense. But again, everything kind of goes back to the way Jalen Daniels is playing. I just think he's going to put up a lot of points. So I went team total over 21.5. Even if they get down, I think he can put up points late in the game.
All right, there you have it. A lot of Kansas love here on the panel. Titan CT in the chat sharing his card. Kansas, Duke, Iowa. Thinks the dogs will be barking there. I'm going to throw another early dog at you here. I like Baylor against SMU. Baylor cannot possibly be as bad as they were against Auburn. That was a very frustrating game. I don't know what Aranda was doing on defense. He was just letting Jackson Arnold just run right through him. Like, I mean, Dave, scoot somebody up. They were just taking what you gave them. That was terrible. What were you thinking? I will say this about SMU. They played a East Texas A&M team last week that was obviously overmatched. SMU only had a 49-yard edge in total yards that game. The Mustangs got a pair of pick sixes, one of them a 95-yarder. That obviously totally changes the complexion of the game. Also, East Texas A&M, in addition to throwing the 95-yard pick six, fumbled inside SMU's 5-yard line. So I think Baylor is another live dog early. We have some question. We had a question earlier. We have to talk about South Florida and Florida. South Florida, obviously, they were the right side against Boise, Ralph. But I'm going to say this. That was another situation where turnovers really dictated the outcome. They were +3 in a game. The total yardage was pretty even.
Steph, we talked about this game last week, and I picked USF. Remember, we said Byron Brown started 2 years ago, and he was a stud. He got hurt last year, and the offense completely fell apart. So what they did offensively didn't surprise me. But remember, +3 turnovers, they got outgained 372 to 378. So the score of 34-7 does not play out the way the game played out. But the more I looked at it, I then thought I was going to like the over. Then I looked at USF and they only ran 53 plays. But again, remember, if you keep getting the ball turned over and you're scoring defensive touchdowns and you have the short field, you don't have to run many plays because you have so many points. So again, I'm misleading with that. I really don't have an opinion. I'll throw out the stat again. Teams off a week 1 win as a dog are only 32% in game 2. So don't overreact, even though I like Byron Brown and I like USF. Playing at Florida is a different scenario. So there's nothing I want to even give out on this game because I wouldn't bet a penny on this game on either side or total. So I will throw it to my esteemed colleague to see if he can give you guys some betting advice.
Okay. Sean, anything on this Floridian battle here?
You're muted, Sean. You never sound better. You've honestly never sounded better.
You guys get all that? Everything good, right?
I can't believe you called that. You called for that play. That's amazing.
I called from Jerry Jones's box. So I run a small model just to kind of give myself a starting point when handicapping these games as far as the huge amount of slate of games that we go with each week. And it gave out take the points with USF. South Florida. But, just like Ralph said, this is a tough environment to go to Florida. Coming off a game where, I wouldn't say it was handed to them. They still had to win the game, but they had a lot of breaks go their way, like you had alluded to. Obviously didn't make my card. If I were going to make a play, I would take the points with South Florida and kind of hold my nose, hope that it's close late. But, going to Florida, going to play the Gators at home after playing Boise State with just kind of, like I said, not given to them, but kind of at least assisted by the Boise State football team in that win last week for the Bulls.
Yeah. Boise State also asleep at the wheel on that fake punt as well. How they did not recognize that was the backup quarterback in is coaching malpractice. Last, I'll just take UConn Syracuse real quick.
Let me jump in one point, Brian. Sorry. You guys, if you follow USF, if Byron Brown has any type of injury, make sure it's probably your biggest downgrade of any player in college football. 24 passes and 14 runs last week. The rest of the team combined for 14 runs. 2 years ago when he played full-time, 427 passes, and he was the leading rusher with 203 carries. The running back had 108 carries. So keep that in mind moving forward for USF.
Excellent point on USF. I know we all monitored his status, Brown's status, going to that bowl game last year on Christmas Eve. He wound up not playing, and we all thought it was over. And then what a wild finish that was. I remember convulsing in my bed on Christmas Eve like any good father would. Anyway, all right. UConn, Syracuse. UConn is better this year. Syracuse is worse. UConn played Syracuse close last year. Money has come in on the Huskies. I would concur with that. I want to let these guys now have a chance. We've been talking for a full hour, giving you an hour breakdown on all these games here for week 2 of college football. Let me give these guys an opportunity now to talk about what they've got on tap for the weekend. Sean, I know you have an incredible special currently available over on your page at WagerTalk.com. Tell the people about it.
Yeah, so I started off the college football season going 5-0, so going to try and keep that going. But if you want my full season of college football that goes all the way throughout the playoffs, you're also going to get all of my horse racing as far as full card selections. That it's going to include the Breeders' Cup, the Claiming Cup races at Churchill. This is going to be Keeneland, Woodbine, Del Mar, Santa Anita. So you don't have to worry about it. Get my college football. You're going to get emailed all of my weekly, daily, full card selections for tracks all across the country, including Canada up in Woodbine. So go take advantage of that. Like I said, I got off to a 5-0 start. I'm going to try and keep that momentum going as long as I can, and then get a little bit of side action on horse racing. Big 2 days coming up with the Breeders' Cup.
Okay, there you have it. College football and horse racing. Incredible combination. John Alvarez, good man there. Ralph. And I know Handy here, and you're ready for a big weekend of college football. Not just college football, but of course, guys, I don't know if you know this, the NFL kicks off tonight. So we've got the NFL going as well. We've got this great 7-day special, $77. You can get a week from your favorite handicapper there. $11 per day every play. Ralph, what do you got?
Did you have to use the calculator to figure out 77 divided by 7?
There we go. Yes.
3-1. So Sean kicked my ass last week. I did cash a 5% in college football. $199 for 30 days. Normal price for a 30-day all access is $299. Get 4 weeks for $199. College football, NFL, any Nerfy plays I release in baseball. The code 199RALPH. No space, 199 RALPH, 30 days, all sports, $199. A great way to try me out for the month of September.
There you go, 199 Ralph. And then I am on a 16-7 all sports run right now, guys. 12-3 run in Major League Baseball. I will be locked and loaded. NFL, college, MLB, soccer on international break this week, so no soccer for you guys. But still, that 7 days for $77 is a great way to get on board. WT.buzz/BP is the place to go for me. Ave Cash, I am glad that we were able to make your hour go fast here. We are, of course, live every Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern, breaking down the college football slate. We'll be back next week. We thank all of you for joining us in the chat. Do not forget, well, smash that like button and click that subscribe button. down below. We appreciate your support here of the Blitz. Until next time.